This is the City Eternal, Chapter 4, A Crossroads. Another day, and Father has made another breakfast of elfberry muffins and juniper tea. My father smiled across the table and asked, "Do you want any, honey?" I nodded no. He cheerfully prepared his own. Oops. Oh, there it is. Here, he was just pretending it was just another day, when my entire world seemed to be imploding. "Doesn't it feel good to be part of the greater whole?" he asked, as he smiled and ate. I was so wrapped up in thought I didn't hear him. He continued monologuing. "We are almost finished the new community center," he said proudly. I was staring out the window, looking at the place where the bar was last night. Now, it was just an empty cave. "Are you even awake?" my father asked. I was still lost in thought and didn't hear him. "So, we decided we were going to eat wasps for dinner," he said. This got my attention, but I pretended that it didn't. "So what will become of the old one, the old community center?" I asked. "Don't worry about it," he said and smiled. "The more the merrier, right? Things always have a place in the forest. There is always a plan. The last one we turned into a home for the mesas, and before that we turned the older one into a church." I shrugged. "But doesn't it seem sometimes that there would be a better use of your time?" His smile quickly flattened, and he leaned across the table and eyed me with a steely gaze. "I'm just trying to make some light conversation, get you thinking positively. Something is going on with you, Cloudy Sky, making you a frumpletoad. You think you know better than the seers? You think you could be a seer yourself?" I shrugged. "I guess you were right. I'm sorry. I've just been down a bit lately. And you are thinking too much, which is as bad for a person as not thinking enough," he said. It was an old Zebra Nation aphorism. "That's true," I said, not wanting to start a conversation or an argument. "Which is why I'm going to have a party for you, something I should have done at your graduation. To celebrate you becoming an adult," he said. "Really?" I asked. "Really," he said, with a broad smile. "I know that adulthood has not been what you expected, but I am and we are all so proud of you. And we all need you in the living forest, and I want to show you that. You have been so distracted lately. Yes, Cloudy Sky, I know your mind is not here. Even the neighbors have commented that you have been missing the community prayers and the potlucks," he said. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wish I believed you," he said, "but don't worry. I have faith that you are not yet lost. Just try harder, and do not talk about your visions anymore. There's so much to be thankful for, and the harvest of plenty is coming up soon. There will be dances. Maybe you will even find a partner." "So you admit they were visions," I said. "Cloudy Sky, that's not what I meant," my father said angrily. "I'm sorry. I will be obedient, and I will try to be thankful," I said. "Good," he said. "And don't sneak out late at night, either. You have to be steadfast. Protect this forest. Follow its rules. Could you imagine a more beautiful world?" I sighed. "Of course not," I said. Although as I looked out the window at the lush forest garden full of life and music, I was starting to feel a bit disconnected from it. My father cleared his plate and stood up. "I'll see you tonight," I said. "Be sure to wear your best," he said, and then waved without looking at me and grabbed his cloak and headed off to work. So Hurricane was right. A party, I mumbled to myself. I felt heavy. It wasn't the clouds in the sky or the lack of sleep that made me feel this way. Rather, as I walked down the street, smiling and waving and saying hello to the neighbors who were walking or watering plants or climbing their tree, it was because I felt so detached from them all. I felt like none of it mattered. Today, Hurricane and I were going to be cleaning out the outhouses near Elfberry Hollow. I liked working there because it was quiet and nobody bothered you, and the houses all had a unique lived-in feel. Most of them were made of cob and had to be built that way. because of the way the land was, and so no two were alike. But my mind couldn't focus on that now. I was too distracted thinking about how distant I felt from everyone around me and how much that hurt. Even my father, who had always been on my side, seemed to be at my throat every day. I was thinking about my future and I couldn't imagine it. Was I really just to clean outhouses for the next 40 years like Hurricane? Just smile and accept it? I was thinking about the Queen and how I saw her watching me, both in my dreams and out, and how there was something wrong with her, something I could not put my finger on. I was thinking about that secret pub from last night, especially the surprise of seeing Hurricane there and how he seemed to be a completely different person than the one I knew. And of course, I was thinking of my mother, how the story I was told that she died at home of a mysterious illness when I was young was a lie. When I try to think back to that period of my youth, it's all a blur. I remember her bleeding, her coughing, and I remember that I was told that she just died one day, happy and surrounded by the ones she loved. But I know my visions are real, and there's more to the story than I've been told. "Bless the living forest," a voice said, interrupting my thoughts. I looked down. It was Hurricane. "Oh, bless the living forest," I replied. "You need to pay attention to where you're going," he said. "People are watching. People are noticing. You need to practice blending in more." "I'm sorry," I said. "I guess I've just got a few things on my mind." He raised his eyebrows. "Don't worry," he said. "Just be wary of attracting too much attention." Then he handed me a shovel. We went to work. I interrupted him after we finished the first few outhouses, asking him, "Can we talk about last night?" He looked at me with a gaze that could have bored a hole in me and said nothing. So we then worked for about an hour. We stopped for water when I asked him, "Have you ever had a vision?" "This is not the time and place," he said and grumbled. "Remember what I said about attracting attention?" "I can work and talk at the same time and do it with a fake smile," I said. Then I told him about my vision about my mom and her passing, and I think I mentioned how it made me sick and lose touch with animals. He didn't say much, but judging from the look in his face, I think he was annoyed at me. At midday, we stopped under a tree, washed our arms and hands, and took turns drinking from a canteen. I was about to bring up the visions again, despite him flaring his nostrils every time I looked at him in the eyes. "Did your father tell you not to talk about this?" he asked. My face turned red. "He did," I said. "How did you know?" "Just a hunch. Listen, maybe I was wrong and you really are not stupid, but this is not the time and place for this," he said, and pointed to the sky. "What's in the sky?" I asked. "Not in the sky. In the trees, idiot," he said. "What's in the trees?" I asked. "Those who can listen," he said, rolling his eyes and groaning. "Ah," I said. "So is there a place we can talk?" I asked. "You already know, though you need to be better at sneaking there," he said. "But if you want more answers to your riddle, why not go to the place that might have them and stop pestering me?" "You mean," I began to ask, but Hurricane interrupted me. He pointed again to the skies. "If you are true to yourself, you will get far," he said, and stood up, quickly cracked his back and knuckles. "Now, let's get back to work." "Just one question," I said, "and I doubt if it matters if someone overhears." He grumbled. "Go ahead then," he said, sighing. "I have to know, what exactly did you do that landed you this job?" I asked. He smiled. "Let's just say I had a penchant for getting in trouble as a kid. Figured stuff out a bit too easily. They didn't know what to do with me, saw me as a nuisance." "That's weird," I said. "I'm the exact opposite. Never caused trouble even once. Never a burden. Why would they stick me with you?" Hurricane shrugged. "Well," he said, "maybe they just don't like you. Or maybe they just don't like me." "I'm sorry," I said. "So why didn't you leave?" "That's a story for another day," he said. "Besides, what would the point of it be without a plan. I was quite like you when I was young, a plan I did not have. Hurricane looked at me for a second, then stood up. End of questioning. Now, back to work. I'm sorry. Sometimes I think too much and I can't shut up, I said. Thinking too much isn't a problem. Talking too much is, he said. We shoveled for another few hours. A beautiful day, really, just perfectly warm and breezy, though I spent it mostly lost in thoughts. The sun was starting to set, and we had just shoveled our last outhouse and mixed straw and compost with the feces on the human ore pile. We walked out of Elfberry Hollow and onto the main switchback that would lead back home. We parted ways at the end of my street, as we always do. This time, instead of just grunting, Hurricane spoke. Listen, he said, covering his mouth with his shirt. I can't stop you if you're going to go there, but for the love of ferns, know when to quit and go home before you cause a scene. Things don't always work out the way you think they will. Go where? I asked. The place where your mother came from, you idiot. I knew her. She was a whisperer, he said. I know, I said. Now, I am going to tell everyone we shared a bit too much smoke weed and you had to sleep it off if anyone comes knocking. But you need to do your part and not be caught, he said. He looked up at the sky, gave me a knowing look, uncovered his mouth, and then walked away. And Hurricane was right. He couldn't stop me, and now that he mentioned the Whisperer's Grove, I knew it was where I needed to go. Where my mother spent so many hours. Even if the people there were hiding the truth, I knew the animals would not. Of course, maybe I wouldn't find the truth, and maybe I wouldn't know what to do with it if I found it. But I had to go to make some sense of my life, my mother's life, the world I lived in. I had to.